Every soul is a candle. Every soul is a candle of God.
Good evening. This is Phillip Namanworth. Welcome again to Creative Spirituality, a meeting place for an exchange of ideas based on a foundation of finding out and exploring what's in our tradition that we might not be so aware of that actually is very useful. And we could add to our emotional, spiritual, physical vocabulary for maneuvering through the world. We're in the fifth book of the Torah. There are 5 books. There are 5 levels of the soul. If you're tuning in for the first time, you're going to hear a lot of things maybe you're not so familiar with, but we will repeat them over and over because there are certain themes. There are numbers that appear again and again, and there are levels of reality that we talk about, but they're very consistent. And so we'll just assume it after the class when we talk if there's something we didn't understand. This is as much of a journey of understanding for me as it is for anybody out there. It's not like I'm going to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony or something, the old Coca-Cola ad. But this week is a lot of things are going on. We just passed the most devastating holiday in the Jewish calendar called Tisha B'Av, which represents the destruction of both temples, plus many other horrible things that happened at the beginning of World War II, the Jews getting thrown out of Spain, and originating in the Torah as a time of the people miscalculating their purpose. And it's interesting, if you read about miscalculations that people make in some way or another, it's just a reminder to us that when we make miscalculations, everybody does it. The important thing is to notice that we make them and to look to get back on track and to move ahead. Similar to the way pain operates in the body. If you have a pain in the body, usually it's trying to tell you, hey, you need to pay attention over here, your shoe size, you haven't bought new shoes in 20 years and your toes are starting to hurt, get new shoes. Or things that happen in a relationship where there's conflict. It's not always because the end is near. It's often because there is a kind of energy going on that needs to be addressed. And the Torah is sort of the blueprint of cosmic energy for how the world works. It's done through a very interesting system of narrative stories and interactions with, how shall I say it, interactions with the higher reality. Because everybody, no matter where we're holding or what our specific beliefs are, very often we believe that things can be better, or that things should be better, or that we have some relations with a spiritual life. Now, I've often spoken about this as the famous Rabbi Twersky, who was also a psychiatrist, and he started a famous rehab program for addicts and stuff. And I think he passed recently. I think he wrote 78 books in his 80 years, and he was quite an extraordinary person. And in one of his books dealing with people who have alcohol problems, and I'm not suggesting anybody out there has them, but he says, why do the founders of AA call it a spiritual problem? It's a very good question. You might think, addiction is kind of a physical, chemical thing. And he lays it out and he says, really, what's the difference between a human being and an animal? And there are many, many differences. And the difference is, like, an animal's not going to postpone a gratification for do something later. Oh, I'll eat that thing later. It's hungry. It's eating now. A human being has the ability to look at something and make a judgment on it and act on it. So when a person is addicted and they can no longer act on it, that's an effect on their spiritual life or an effect on our spiritual um, template in general. We all have something that we know we should do better, and it takes longer because we've learned over the years that the heart lags far behind the mind. The mind knows things right away. I know I should do this, but it takes a while, and it's good to know that the heart needs time to catch up. Same thing for anybody who's an artist or anything. Inspiration is something we all seem to seek. We seek it in movies, we seek it in books, whatever, theater, music, art, conversation, wherever we seek it, and we're always pleasantly engaged in it. But then after that segment is over, we can find ourselves not remembering or longing to feel something we felt before. So one of the main things this class has been about for the last 37 years is how to integrate what we sort of understand on a higher intellect and make it into our lives. And part of Moses's job as an interface between God and mankind in some way was to channel energies that we, if we do certain acts, will integrate them. You know, if you're a musician or something and someone tells you do certain fingerings or something, if you're not playing it on the horn, you can't do it. Or someone's fixing it. You know, there's something wrong with your carburetor. Here's how you fix it. Yeah, well, you have to get in and start working on carburetors. And once you see it, you own it. So an inspiration can become just part of your natural vocabulary of who you are. And life, in a way, generally is contains an element of drawing down higher energies into who we are and using them. Because what's the sense of listening to classes or going to different places where people are very bright and brilliant? And I've had many examples when I say, oh, someone will tell me, I heard this great class. And I say, well, yeah, well, what do you remember? What do you do? Well, oh, you had to be there. See, the person listening absorbed the speaker's knowledge, but didn't do any work yet on making it theirs. This is why sometimes it's good to take notes or to jot down a question or to the Hasidim used to, after a rabbi gave one of his long talks, would meet with him later and give it back to him word for word, and he would correct them so that the concepts would become part of them. Because when we're learning from a higher source or from a source we don't know, our vessel for receiving that source has not been polished yet. So if all of a sudden you've never been to a Torah class and you're hearing things you never heard before, it takes a while to find a way to grasp it in your terms. And that's what happens over the consistency of study. One of the wonderful things you can find out is that it says in this fifth book of the Torah, Moses is repeating everything sort of that happened to the Jewish people in their journey from the beginnings of time to where they are now on the footsteps of going into the land of Israel. The whole Torah is about going into the land of Israel. And he's reminding of things. But it's a different thing to experience something and having the experience, and then have someone who is perhaps on a different level say, this is what happened there, and giving you a layer that you didn't understand because on their level, they could see it perhaps, and I'm not saying it's true, but perhaps a little clearer or within a broader context. I remember talking to a good friend of mine who I grew up with in the Bronx, and part of what was difficult in my life was my father died when I was young. So the way I experienced my needs at that time, which I wasn't even aware of, was one way. And I was talking to him. He said, oh, no, it was great. We had so much fun on the block and everything. And I remember it sort of, but I remember it in my way. And so when we say Moses is speaking, he's channeling something uh, from a higher place, and it's got a little piece of him in it. So, in other words, say you speak to a friend later and you say, well, what was that crazy class about? So, it was this, that, and the way that you grab it will tell you how you're able to use it. Or I remember for first starting out at this, I'm 80. I took a shave to look a little younger for my wife. Um, I'm 80. I started this business of studying it when I was 40. I had been a Buddhist, a Hindu. I studied esoteric Christianity. I studied all kinds of things. But when I heard that in our own tradition we had such wonders and marvels, I was really very angry. And I didn't understand a lot of it because we come to every situation with a certain amount of set layers. We've discussed in this class many times that there are 7 candles on the menorah, which represent 7 basic emotional types. And through our discussion of them over the year, we're always encouraged to find out which one you have as more in your life. Now, it's speaking mystically, everybody has all the emotional uh, types, but one is more prevalent in each kind of person. So the first one is called kindness and love. It's called chesed. So chesed is more about giving and kindness and stuff like that. And then we do meet a lot of people who are constantly giving, and that's with it. And then there's this, the balance of that is called gevura, which means restraint. Someone is a little restricted, someone puts a little bit more balance on things. So you have to know when to stop. We don't want to be enablers. And depending, we know people who are a little more strict and the people who are a little more hippie-ish like me, and that they want to always share everything they have there, or whatever. It's a personality trait. Another is harmony and compassion, the ability to stop thinking about what you think about something and see what someone else needs. Brian was telling about being happy this week that he was able to help some people out. In order to help someone out, one has to develop not just an answer to their needs or things, but to see things from their point of view a little bit, to see how you can communicate with them. Because what's the good of helping someone out if it's just they don't understand anything? It's a responsibility and a mitzvah. It's a joy to be able to, it's a joy to be able to help someone out, to be able to stretch outside oneself, to transcend oneself, that one is not always closed. The Torah is also a journey on how to, when it says how to, it's not do this, do that. It really means take a look at what we think of our self and our universe, and how a certain amount of humility, which we call bittul, and getting out of one's own way and understanding what it means to be part of something bigger enhances our individuality. Many people think that the more humble they are, though, they're going to lose a part of themselves, like giving in, or relationships, which of course are difficult to start with anyway, because people are different. They shouldn't always be just compromises. The two people have to get together and form a third element, which is greater than both of them. Now, Judaism proposes that there is a blueprint between the creator and the creation, which is us. And the interface between that communicates that knowledge of how to access your true potential and your soulfulness, and to achieve meaning in life on a certain level, is called the Torah. So it says in Hebrew, Torah, Dibra Balashon B'nei Adam. In the Talmud, it says that the Torah is written in the language of a human being. In other words, many esoteric concepts or things that seem Well, I'll put in English language for us so we can understand them because they may be on a much higher level. The analogy used often for how that operates is that a teacher is trying to teach a new student something very difficult or something they've never learned before. The teacher cannot give over their total knowledge. They have to contract it to the level of the student. And yet the student has to be able to understand it in an accurate manner. You know, people hear the words analogy, metaphor, simile, but a true metaphor is, even though the two is that you tell someone something on a contracted level for their ability or for, and it enables them to use that to eventually climb back up to a higher level by themselves. Excuse me. So I just like that definition of metaphor also. It's not just that one thing is like, why do we have a story of Abraham? Abraham in the Torah is called chesed. He's called kindness. What does this mean that a person is called kindness? Once asked my Rav, because I went to visit my Rav, his name is Rabbi Simon Jacobs, with my sister, because my mother wanted to leave her body to science. Her eyes especially. She could barely see, but she wanted to leave her eyes to science. And he was talking about the body and the why we don't cremate and this and that. And he says, God wants to see how the spiritual molecules, so to speak, of you developed in your life. What did they become? And it was very interesting a concept. And we have that ability. The reason I'm speaking about this is that we all can do kindness, but sometimes you can become kind. It's like someone came to one of my teacher's classes one time and he said, "You've been discussing this issue, and now I understand something about my father. Um, I always thought he was a kind person, blah, 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 blah. But now I see he was a regular person who did kindness when he felt like it. If you went to him a couple of days a week, he would write you a check, he would do anything. But if you came on Tuesday when he was playing poker, he would slam the door in your face." This is what the guy said. And we're not judging anybody here. We're just saying there is a difference. You know, sometimes you're lucky enough that a friend of yours is conversing with you and you say something straight from the heart. You know, one of those open moments. That's becoming kindness. You can become the thing you want to be. It doesn't mean that that we're using it in a way to teach others or anything like that. It just means that it's the way you are. You meet a person and sometimes you say, "Oh, I like that person's aura." You know, in Hebrew, aura means light. What does it mean? I like that aura. It means that there's a certain kind of light that shines out of uh, certain people and stuff when you've absorbed a certain kind of being. In fact, when Moses comes down from the mountain with the second set of tablets, his face had Keren Or. It was shining beams of light. So if you see the Sistine Chapel, they put actual horns on Moses because it translates sort of as horns of light. They did not understand the Hebrew text. But it's true. There are certain people you like to be around. There's certain people take a lot of work. And, you know, we all have both kinds, and we all are all kinds. If you've ever been to a Seder, they say there's 4 different types of children with different attributes within a wide range. But if one really discusses what's going on and discovers we're all those things at one time or another. So we get the experience through studying Torah, or else we're making an axiom that this happens, that you get to know yourself better. And the more you're able to get out of your own way, the more you're able to express who you really are. Because it says, Hashochet yaver beinei chachamim, a bribe blinds the eyes of a wise person and perverts the words of the righteous. What kind of bribe are they talking about? Well, yeah, sure. If someone gives you money, it's what they're talking about is a person can never get rid of their own sense of self-love. It's on a subtle level. That's why sometimes if a person or a judge, especially if they have something invested in a case, they have to recuse themselves. So one has to be aware of what one's own proclivities are. There are some people, no matter if there's two people arguing, they'll always want to just make it better instead of listening first and seeing what's going on. And maybe perhaps having the humility to say, I really don't understand how to do this, because we speak from who we are, who we've developed, what layers we wear, what we think is great. And that is great on the level of kindness and restraint. But when it comes to the level of compassion, which is called Tiferet, which is the third candle on the menorah, Tiferet is a mixture of giving and receiving, but it's not based on your own desire. It's based on what the situation actually needs. In other words, I have to concentrate more on that person's needs. My personality may be to be a certain way, and maybe someone comes to you because they know your personality is a certain way and they need to hear that. That's one thing. But to actually communicate with each other, we're looking to find out, what's going on here in this situation, or let's talk it out. Talking about talking and seeing, Moses was on a level called sight. And he prayed for the Jewish people to reach the level of hearing. Another kind of strange thing. If you read the account in the Bible of the giving of the Ten Commandments, it says the people saw the sounds. Now, come on, that's science fiction. He saw the sounds. In other words, what was normally more far away became visible to them. What's the difference between sight and sounds? Sight is when you see something, the impact of seeing something, because it's an experience, is much stronger than hearing about something. Now let's discuss the difference a little bit. The reason I'm talking about this is because in this week's chapter, and the Torah is split up into about 54 chapters, Moses is begging God to let him go into the land. And God says, no, you can't. There's many reasons for that, but you can see the land. What Moses wanted to do was give over his power of seeing reality in a certain way and passing it on to the people through his benefit. And Hashem says to him, no, but I will raise them to the level of hearing. Now, what is the advantage of hearing over seeing something? If you see something, if a judge sees an action, he cannot be a judge. I think that's the law. You can correct me. But if a judge hears about something, they don't have to recuse themselves. He heard about it, so now let's hear about it again. When you hear about something, you have to think about it. You have to make sure you got it right. You have to use your brain. You have to contemplate it. You have to see how you feel about it. You have to do actual work to make it yours. When you see something, the experience, you're affected by the power of the experience. God wants us to be able to take that power of experience, of hearing that something that seems normal, and seeing the things in our life that can be elevated up to a higher level, and understanding them on a certain level, so that we actually can hear each other. People say to each other, I hear you. And sometimes you believe them and sometimes you don't. It reminds me when my daughter was little and she would say to me, Daddy, you're not listening to me. And I would say back to her everything she just said. But she'd say, yeah, but you're not listening to me. Excuse me for a minute. One of the definitions in Judaism of listening is giving someone their sacred space. It's an incredible concept that we can be together and you feel that I'm allowing you to be you and you're allowing me to be me. I don't have to believe it, but I don't have to contradict it the minute you say it. It's not a fight unless you're in a business deal or something or whatever. Sometimes people need to be heard, and then they will ask you. I've often asked my teacher how to respond in certain situations, and he's often advised me, yes, people what they'd like from you. Do you want an opinion? Do you just need to talk? You want to have a beer? What is it you know? Because we tend to put forth who we are, which is good. That's why people talk to each other, because they know something that they trust in someone else. But we can expand that into a closeness with others by understanding that everyone is born in a divine image. Most of what we're saying tonight has to do with the basic Jewish fact and belief that each person matters, that you were born for a purpose, a mission that no one else in the whole world can do. Whether your parents told you were born as an accident, or whether you never had any confidence, or whether you're always self-deprecating, or whatever, behind all that is that you matter. You may not feel that way. I was writing a book many years ago, and we interviewed a woman who used to do consultations for banks at, I don't know, $15,000 an hour or whatever she was getting at that time. And she said, no one, but I'm doing that. Nobody knows that in my head, my mother's still yelling at me and stuff, because we may not be able to get rid of the input that's been coming at us for so many years. But on a spiritual level, the name of the game is, how do I gain self-control so I can decide how to deal with that? Another, 1 second, you okay? How to deal with that? How do I have self-control? Someone steps on your foot and you feel like punching them in the nose, but you go, oh, no, I'm not going to do that. Where I grew up in the Bronx, there was a different response. People were careful about this, that, and the other thing. But at a certain age, it dampens your flexibility. You want to decide how you are and how you respond to the universe. We say the heart rules the mind, but the mind has to rule the heart too. In fact, the Zohar, which is the mystic book of the Torah, which when we say mystic, what we mean is that there is depth to everything, and there are inner meanings and outer meanings. So a mystic is someone who understands how the outer meanings and the inner meanings are connected, sort of like in a scientific way, if understanding string theory or something, or quantum mechanics helps you understand a certain phenomenon that's a physical phenomenon that anyone can notice. It's just how many layers are there. So a mystic, you might see a tree and they might see the aspect of compassion. We don't know, because they're seeing the inner thing that causes the outer thing. On one level, we want people, and we hope people will act a certain way, because that's how we respond. On another level, if people are close to us, we want to know why they do that. And I know for me, chasing it my whole life is why I do what I do, as much as I can figure out. Win some, lose some, no matter how much a batting average does not get to 1,000. Everybody know what a batting average is? The top batting averages, I don't know, Ty Cobb or somebody was 300 and something. That means, 6.5 times they could have struck out. And the Torah gives us a way to analyze our swing, so to speak, and see how do I react in these situations? Why am I angry at this? Why do I do this without driving oneself crazy? But it affords you a way of thinking that covers and gives you a greater flexibility of looking at the events that happen in one's life. I'll take another concept. We've discussed the concept that a person matters, and we're part of a cosmic symphony. God put you here. He needs your note in that symphony. So you have to find out what it is and play it. You can ask people who they are, and they'll tell you what they do for a living. Or they'll tell you how they see themselves psychologically, how other people see them. The Torah tells you who you are right in the beginning. It says mankind, Adam, doesn't mean just man, it means mankind. Mankind was created in the divine image. Each person, Jewish, non-Jewish, whoever they are, is created with a divine part to them. When one can at least start with that, one knows a little bit more about themselves. Now, of course, there are things that happen in life that help us form, especially dysfunctionality in the home. Or we live in a crazy world, and of course, people are affected by it. And how we look at challenges in life is one of our big issues. Some people think the world's always against them. Some people understand that if there is a reality that's a higher reality, if reality is reality, it's reality everywhere. In other words, the component of truth is that it's true in all situations at all times. So people say, I'm looking for God. Well, maybe it's already, allow it in. Sometimes we don't allow each other in. So we've covered that just a little bit. Moses is saying to God, he's praying because certain things had happened. He wasn't being allowed to go into the land. He's praying to God, please let me go into the land. We're at the cusp of God. We're right across from Jericho, in the land of Moab. And God says, no, you're not the right leader. Because all the books of the Torah up to now are based on the kind of miraculous things. I mean, the 10 plagues were miraculous. The splitting of the Red Sea was miraculous. 3 million people heard God's voice at Mount Sinai and saw and passed out from the vibes and were restored. You're not leading a regular life. And this led to a very bad mistake. When we were ready to go into the land, the tribes themselves said, let us send in some spies to see how we could, conquer the land. And they saw the difficulties of living in the material world, and they came back and said, we can't do it. And that night, all the people cried. And that was the night of Tisha B'Av. They misunderstood that the object of life is not to avoid life, but to raise yourself to a level where you can deal with everything and elevate it and transform it. We're talking idealistic terms in some way. And in Hebrew, it's called the skafka and it's hapka. There are certain situations, say at work, where you make yourself strong enough so that the negativity that's going on doesn't affect you. Or if you're in certain situations. But there's an ideal state where you can actually take that negative energy and use it to transform the situation. So that you're not just escaping from it. I'm not talking about dire events at this point that are going on today. But in general, not everything is on that level. Joshua, who is going to take over and bring the people into the land, is someone who's on a little bit different level than Moses. I want to explain to those who haven't listened, maybe when we say higher or lower or more or less spiritual, we don't mean it in any kind of physical sense. We mean higher means more revealed. Lower means something is more concealed. We live in a world which there are other worlds that precede it conceptually. And this is the lowest world, meaning that it's the most concealed. In other words, you don't see the inside of everything you see around you. You don't see the godliness behind it. You don't see the molecules. You don't see how everything is connected. But you do see that when the soul leaves, the body is just a physical thing. But the world was created that way. In fact, the darkness and the obscurity and the confusion we have is God's fault. It decided that we need to find reality on our own because then it's yours. It's an extraordinary thing that you can take a physical object, say charity, a coin, and give it to someone else, and that causes a certain amount of light to be drawn into the world that affects the world. There is a system called Torah and mitzvahs. A mitzvah, some people they call it a good deed, but mitzvah translates as a connection. It's a connection between the inner and outer. It's between higher worlds and lower worlds. When a person prays, what they do is they draw down energy because they have a relationship with something greater. They draw a packet of energy. It's like quantum. But the energy can be used in a lot of different ways. So when we pray in our prayers for specific things, good health, the blessing focuses that energy on healing. If we're going to eat something and we say a blessing on the food, we're not blessing the food. We're saying we want the energy, the spark inside the food to nourish that deeper part of us. We've heard the expression, man doesn't live by bread alone, but everything that comes from the mouth of God. What does that mean? It means that there's an internal thing. Now, one of the things that gets discussed in all the different chapters of the Bible is intention, how we do things. In the end, doing something is very important. If you help someone out, whatever your intentions are, it's still a really good thing. Is it better to have good intentions? Yes. Does it elicit a different light? Yes, especially in certain ways. So we're trying to realign ourselves with who we are and what we do, because when Adam and Chava were created, they were in line with reality. It was only after they ate of the fruit that because they invited their own agenda and superimposed it on reality, that we have the world we have now, which is another plot that was sent up. It's not like the creator didn't know what he was doing. And, for those of us who, either I say, I believe in God, I don't believe in God, I like the word. I don't like to even use the word. You could think of undefined layers of reality, unlimited and undefined. We have ways of connecting to what's infinite. They're inside us. And the playbook is called the Torah. Torah means teaching, but it means to draw light from. In Aramaic, it's called oraisa, which means to draw light. We want to be enlightened. We want something to illuminate the inner cause of what the reality of something is. Say a person, in this society, especially if they don't get a response and a hit record or something from everything, the meaning changes. Maybe the meaning is being able to create that thing, and maybe it affects one person or two people, and those are the people you were sent to this world to do a favor. We don't know. Another concept we have is hashgacha pratis. Hashgacha pratis means that, as it says in one of the studies, the Pirkei Avot, everything is foreseen, but man is granted free will. How could everything be foreseen and you have free will? This is one of the paradoxes of life. And life is full of paradoxes. In fact, most of the things that affect us, who we love, how we love, what we prefer, are not logical things. They're just the way we are. It's learning to be at peace with the paradoxes of life. There's a chapter in the Torah where someone who's impure from touching a dead body has to be purified with the ashes of a certain cow, and the people who perform the service become impure, making this other person pure. Doesn't make any sense. It's one of the paradoxes of life. But when we know how things are created and how the parameters work, we have a greater range of choices and options. You can always be the way you feel in the moment. There's no one stopping you. But if you can only be the way you feel in the moment, and we all know people who say, that's the way I am, you don't like it, tough luck. I've worked in the theater for many years, besides all the things I've done in music, and I've worked with people who always have to tell everybody what's on their mind. And they call it being truthful. And in the meantime, you see them hurting people's feelings because they're not sensitive. There's ways to do things. And one of the great things is that we have each other to consult with. We can call each other and say, I've got this bad, a tough problem going on and I need to do this. You have any suggestions? And just having a friend to bat it back and forth with helps draw down an answer. Studying Talmud is done by two people sitting opposite each other, yelling at each other. They're arguing. What are they arguing? They're arguing within the framework of reality, of the Torah reality, what's going on. And they have to bring proof because within the system, everything has to be logical within the system. Just like if you go to a theater play or read a book, and this is different than reality. In fiction, everything has to kind of work. If you're reading Agatha Christie, you want to say, oh, yeah, that's the guy who did this, who did that. It's always terrible when the killer turns out to be the milkman who was not even in this show. But in life, things don't happen that way. In life, all kinds of things happen. But for me, only, and for many others, learning to live, make peace with the paradox and to be comfortable being uncomfortable as we grow is a part of the journey, especially if you've ever had children. It's very, very challenging. The Jewish attitude towards challenges is that obstacles are put in your way to make you dig deeper. And the last week we had one of the hardest holidays for us, the destruction of the temples and the exile of the Jewish people and murder of millions of Jews. And but even that is called a Yerida Tzorech Aliyah. It's a downfall for the purpose of a greater result later. All the obstacles in our life are considered. Excuse me, I had a little something in my throat. Are considered obstacles that will become part of the energy that you use. So this has been the darkest month, and the full moon. We Jews go by a lunar calendar, so the 15th of every Jewish month is a full moon. On the 9th, it's about a half, but this is a full moon. It means, and when there's a full moon in a month, it means the spirituality of that month is in completeness. And this is the most complete full moon because it follows the darkness. The light that comes out of darkness is stronger than regular light. King Solomon says the advantage of wisdom over ignorance is the advantage of or min hahoshek. It's the advantage of light from darkness. He doesn't say over darkness. From what I know about physics, one of the strongest things in the whole universe is a black hole, right? There's no light coming out of that, right? It's the strongest thing. It's the darkest. It sucks everything in, but it's got all this energy. Sometimes you meet someone with that's so covered up that they feel like a black hole, or sometimes that we feel that. But in there is a certain energy. And of course, we're looking for guidelines on how to maneuver. And so we can do the mission that we were given in life. Each one of us as an individual was given different things. Each one of us was put in different circumstances because our responsibility is to bring a special light to our corner of the world. Where you go, I'm not going to go. The people you meet, you're going to have opportunities with, I'm not. And each one of us is built in a certain way because are built the way to facilitate what our mission in life is. I'm not 7'2" and I'm not a center. I'm not going to play for the Knicks. It's not happening. I was born with a certain sensitivity and this and that, and then I went. We study this or that, or we have interrelationship this or that, and then we have to say, what am I use this for? And sort of like Moses getting ready to go into the land, which is sort of like the highlight of the Torah, the formation of us as a people and going into our land. Many of us here are at an age where in former generations, people were what they call retired. Many of us are 70, 80 and going, what am I going to do now? We've been given a new obstacle. We have energy, we have technology, and we say, the things I did before were great. Am I going to sit and worry that I can't do them anymore? Or am I going to rebuild from who I am now? And I've had this discussion with a lot of people calling me and talking to me about it. And once you understand that this section of your life is very important, you can start looking at it in that light. Instead of just saying, I can't run as fast as I could, or, I need the cane, or I whatever. So the Torah is called a light. The fifth book of the Torah is being spoken in Moses' own words. And as I started out by saying, he's relating to people things that their fathers and mothers knew, because most of the older people died off by this time because of the sin of the spies. A whole generation died off, and the people who are now going into the land are not so familiar with miracles. They are going to have to bring spirituality to a material environment. Some of them were babies or weren't born when the sea split, or when there was, these are miraculous events, or when God spoke on the mountain. The first year that the Jews were came out of Egypt. It's a different experience. So it's called Vaeskanan. This chapter means Moses pleaded with God, let me go, let me go. And he shows them the land, but there are many terms for pleading and for prayer. And this one, Vaeskanan, has the word chen in it, which means grace. And the original title of this class was Make a Request. Moses wasn't saying, I deserve to go. I did this, I did that, I faced down Pharaoh, I dealt with 3 million Jews. He doesn't say it. He asks as a request. And it's a lesson for us that we should request what we need in life so we can do our mission, because there's something we need that. Someone once asked in the class a wonderful question. She said, we were talking about Rosh Hashanah, and she said, I didn't know on Rosh Hashanah you're allowed to ask for what you need. Pray for your own needs. That you were supposed to, do penitence and this and that. I said, no, you have to pray for your needs, because you can't do your mission without your needs. One thing is for the sake of another. Judaism is not out to kill the ego. God made the ego and the body at the same time. It says God created heaven, spirit, and earth, physical. But it's how one uses it. The ego is not meant to just be for your gratification. It's to serve something greater. But to make that move and to understand that takes a certain amount of engagement and study and interaction with other people. And actually, you can have much more control in the end over how you act towards other people. In tefillin, men put on tefillin. There's a piece on the head, there's a piece on the arm right next to the heart. and there's long strands which draw the energy into this world on the hand. Because in the end, the main thing is doing the things you need to do. It's great to have great intentions, like going to a business person who says, I love your idea. I'm going to tell everybody about it, but doesn't write the check. You need to write the check. And in our own lives, sometimes we need to write the check of doing the right thing in the best way that we're able to at that time, and becoming the person who tries to do that and does that with a basic underlying feeling of joy. Judaism is about joy. You should be joyful, even when things are difficult. So joy doesn't always mean laughing. It just means, it can mean just a wholeheartedness. It's a sort of a broad scale of accepting life on and owning the difficult parts and the good parts and the loving parts and the infuriating parts, and knowing one is working towards making their corner of the world a brighter place, and that we are all related. We are all in this together. We are all one people. And I want to give everybody a bracha that this Friday is the 15th of Av. It's a day when a lot of corrections were made in history that brought us closer together. And we didn't have time to talk about them tonight. That'd be another few hours. And that we should feel closer and more one with each other, because the temples were destroyed because of people hating each other for no reason. When Rabbi Akiva says that loving your fellow is one of the main things of Judaism, he doesn't say loving your fellow, no matter, except if they believe this or that. It's very hard to keep that love. And maybe understand that we all need each other. We're all part of this universe together. And together we can actually change the world. And I give everybody a bracha for a good Shabbos and good health. And let me see, your father's yurtzeit was on the 10th of Av, Monday.
Sunday night.
Avraham Abba ben Yehuda Lev, you should have an Elias Neshama. And those who need a healing, God should bless them with a healing, a rapid healing. And we'll talk after the class is officially over. And I thank you for tuning in again. This is Phillip Namanworth, Creative Spirituality. Be well.
Every soul is a candle. Every soul is a candle of God sent down